This is a review for Sucker Punch, The Art of the Film by Zack Snyder, published by Titan Books in 2011. And just before we get into the review, I want to say a quick but huge thanks to Matt over on Patreon for his support of the channel. It really does mean more than you can know, and is a really brave and wonderful first step in what I hope will be able to lead to some great improvements for the channel and helping to establish more of a community for the people who are really enthusiastic about these type of books. So many thanks to you again, Matt, for your support over on the channel's Patreon page. So before I start speaking about the book generally and talking a bit about the interesting publication history for this book, I just want to pause to point out my two favorite pages which appear really early on and get the book off to a great start. So you can see these are some early character concept pieces, which surprisingly way too few art books do, and I know that's a pet peeve of mine as well as a lot of other people's. A lot of art books neglect to show the earliest kernels of an idea and then following that up with how the idea grew and changed into what we see on the screen. And I particularly like the ones shown here in this book for two reasons. Because one, as you can see, the style is very anime influenced, and of course in the final film we see tons of anime inspired imagery, and most major Hollywood films don't seem to adopt any sort of concept art styles other than that sort of vague, sketchy, impressionist sort of digital art you see a lot of. But don't worry, there's plenty of that sort of boring crap all throughout the rest of the book. So it's really cool to see a different style of art being used in a major Hollywood movie to explore visual development. And then secondly, what I really like is that except for the fact they're kind of scantily clad gun-toting ladies, they don't actually bear much resemblance to what we see in the final film, which again I think is really cool to be able to see these characters in their earliest forms. Like you can see on the right here, those two characters are ideas for Amber, and there's really nothing else that translates to what we see on screen. So I thought those two pages were really cool. Unfortunately, they're the high point of the book for me. That it's a tradition that does not continue through the rest of the book, and also unfortunately they don't then follow these pages on through more development art so we can see the characters grow. Like the next time the characters appear, it's like, okay, the characters are decided, now we're on to costume design. So Sucker Punch was pretty negatively received when it came out, but whatever you think of the story, I think there is no denying that this movie is visually outstanding. So I think it's the perfect sort of movie to get an art book, because what other movie has an art book where underneath one cover you can see giant samurai with Gatling guns, dragons, orcs, robots, burlesque, clockwork Nazis, giant mechs, but then to also have it all visually united and working together as one vision. I just think the sheer variety is so cool. Another really cool thing is that this book is about 250 pages, which is about 90 pages longer than a standard art book. However, the unfortunate thing is that those 100 extra pages you're getting are really just filled with stills from the movie, which kind of sucks, but I really do appreciate the extra thickness of this book. With the exception of those character pages I showed you at the start, and then some costume designs, there's really no other character art in this book for sort of the main cast. A lot of the first half of this book is dedicated to the stills and environmental art, and I wasn't really as impressed with the asylum stuff, but then as we go through it looks at each of the fantasy worlds in the movie, including I guess sort of like the burlesque fantasy, and those are where the book really shines for me. Like I said, it's just so cool being able to see all these different things, you know, have these mech designs on one page and then you go a few pages and you're suddenly looking at these blueprints for a medieval castle. It's so good. Anyone who's familiar with or enjoys the long-running heavy metal magazine will definitely get a kick out of the sort of visuals in this book. Zack Snyder has said that that magazine was definitely a huge influence on him, and you can see it all throughout this book, where the basic ideology is sexy, cool action. And then the other section I really like in this book is at the very end there's a section on like posters and promotional art, which is something that you don't actually see in really any art or making of books. So it was really nice to see the book using its extra pages to include some of those. All the text in the book is written by the writer, director, producer of the movie, Zack Snyder, and even though having the writer, director write a tie-in book like this for the film is super rare and sounds super cool, there's really not much text in this book at all, and what is there offers absolutely no sort of behind the scenes information. You just get the very occasional tiny paragraph explaining the story of the characters. More making of behind the scenes information, that's definitely something that the book could have benefited from, I think. Another thing the book lacks is unfortunately something that a lot of art books lack, which is any real exploration of concepts that were explored or played around with, but were then ultimately not included in the film. There are one or two abandoned concepts shown in the book, but more than anything, that just sort of serves to remind you that this movie, probably more than most, had a lot of cool concepts that were explored and played around with and abandoned, and so it's a shame that the book doesn't really explore that further. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was the book's rather unusual sort of publication history. So the book came out like a month before the movie, and Titan released a standard edition and a limited collector's edition, and it was just that very standard sort of limited edition art book that I really hate, where they include a slipcase, an art print, and a certificate that was signed by Zack Snyder in this case, and then charge you 3 times the price. But what's interesting is, for some reason I have no idea of, Titan, I don't know if they just decided to do a really small print run for the art book or what, but that first printing of the standard edition sold out super fast, and there was this really weird moment where a couple of weeks just after the movie had come out, it was cheaper to buy a brand new copy of the limited edition than it was to buy the standard edition on the second-hand market. So then a few months after that, Titan released a second printing, but with a different cover. That's actually the one we're looking at here. And then I'm not sure what went on, whether they just did another very limited print run or what, but then that book sold out super quick. And a couple of months later, they reprinted the book a third time with a new cover, as well as a second printing of 750 copies of the limited edition, also with a new cover and a different art print included. And even though this information is probably super boring to everyone, I just wanted to mention it for posterity's sake. As a really avid fan of these sort of art and making of books, it was just really interesting to me because I have never heard of a book getting so many reprintings within such a short amount of time, and then the fact that they also changed the cover each time just kind of stood out to me in the annals of art and making of books. The other thing I really like about the visuals of the book is that rather than just dumping pictures on a blank page, there is a real sense of graphic design and attention to detail in the book, which I always appreciate seeing. So on the whole, the book definitely does have its flaws and won't necessarily appeal to everyone, but having said that, this is definitely the sort of art book I could see myself recommending to someone, even if they didn't like the movie. If you're the sort of person who likes these sort of kick-ass fantasy worlds, that I could definitely imagine it being enjoyed by people who have never even seen the movie.